What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. On my recent trip to Japan, we got to experience a lot of cool things and roller coasters, and while they were fun, there was something that was definitely missing. At first, I didn't really notice though, but then it hit me. We did not ride one single wooden roller coaster on our entire trip. The entire trip. And to be honest, this kind of bummed me out. Where were all the wooden roller coasters in Japan? Well, after some quick research, I found out that Japan wasn't actually even allowed to build wooden roller coasters until somewhat recently, and in fact, there's only 3 left in the entire country. But this then got me wondering about these 3, and I was surprised to learn that of them, there's actually a forgotten one that happens to be the 5th longest wooden coaster in the entire world. Like legit, out of the 185 wooden roller coasters still operating, which is kind of sad, Japan has the 5th longest one in the entire world. So, what is it, and where did it come from? This is the awesome story of Kijima Kogen's Jupiter. As I mentioned in the intro, although Japan has had numerous notable roller coasters throughout the years, including coasters that have held records of the world's longest, fastest, and tallest coasters, it has had relatively few wooden coasters. This came as a direct result of Japanese earthquake engineering regulations that restricted the construction of tall wooden structures in the early 1900s. And so, it wasn't until after these restrictions were modified in 1988 that Jupiter, the topic of today's video, and also the first wooden coaster in Japan, was able to open. This opening happened in 1992 under manufacturer Intamin Amusement Rides, and it's now passed on designer Curtis D. Summers. Unfortunately, Curtis Summers passed away the same year Jupiter opened, and this coaster was his final creation. And just off the top of my head here, some rides that he's responsible for were Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas, Cyclone at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and even Mean Streak at Cedar Point, I believe. So he's a pretty cool guy. Nonetheless, Jupiter ended up costing a whopping $18 million to construct, and took 2 years to finish on the outskirts of its park, which by the way is super pretty. Located in southern Japan, this thing sits at the base of Mount Yufu, way up in the mountains, and similar to Fuji-Q Highland, which I did have the chance to visit, it's literally in the middle of nowhere. It can also briefly be seen in the 1994 movie Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, if anyone cares. Anyways, transitioning off of its history, let's take a look at some stats and the ride's layout. Sitting at a height of about 150 feet, Jupiter isn't really all that tall, and its max speed is only 57 miles per hour. Now, obviously what it lacks in height and speed is definitely made up by its impressive length, which is almost an unbelievable 5,250 feet of track. This amount of track makes up for a ride experience lasting a total of 2 minutes and 34 seconds, which is a pretty substantial amount of time for a coaster. Starting with an RMC style intro, the ride begins with a turn to the left out of the station, which dips below later parts of the ride and enters a few more dips and turns. This is followed by a large chain lift, where guests are greeted with stunning views of the surrounding forest as they crest the top of the lift. From here, riders will then experience a rather large pre-drop to the right before entering the true first drop on the ride down to the ground. This leads up into a 270-degree turn, where an awesome 3 airtime hills follow and a turnaround. There is a mid-course though, which is next, but it doesn't actually bring the ride to a full stop. In fact, something interesting to note about Jupiter's design: if a train were to stop here, it would have to be removed by the park entirely as it couldn't finish the remaining layout. Once you do pass through this point though, the ride continues up into its support structure, where a further 2 airtime hills follow and the end of the ride. A pretty cool looking coaster indeed, and definitely one worth checking out at some point too. I will say, I do know from some friends that it does ride pretty rough though, so that might be one bad thing worth noting, but otherwise it looks all good. And I wouldn't say let's RMC this thing either, because like I said, and I just learned from the script, there are actually less than 200 wooden coasters left in the entire world. That's a pretty low number. So I think we should start keeping some of these things around. But that is the end of the video, so as always, it's been a major pleasure creating new content for all of you, and if you did like it, please feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed today's content. It really does help a lot, so I'd appreciate it. Of course, stay tuned for another video coming in a couple days as well, and until then, we'll see you all there. See ya.